Contrary to popular opinion, I don't think Scott Cawthon had any plan for the story of Five Nights at Freddy's until about Game 3, which drastically changed in FNaF 4 and drastically changed again in Sister Location. To solve the FNaF lore, we need to understand that some of the events of the games aren't canon. Problem is, we don't know what to retcon. To clarify, I'm going to walk you through what the FNaF lore was at the time of each game's release, starting with FNaF 1. There are two avenues at which we are drip-fed pieces of the FNaF 1 story: the phone calls and the in-game Easter eggs. The phone calls inform us of a few things. Firstly, that management is both knowing of and negligent of the dangerous nature of the animatronics. We are also told about the Bite of 87, where it is implied that someone lost their frontal lobe at the hands of an animatronic, but we receive no more information about this incident. The time frame at which the phone calls were recorded is somewhat unclear. Is the phone guy at another location? It kinda makes sense, except for one piece of information that would dismiss this theory. When Phone Guy is recording his last message, he tells you to check inside the suits in the back, meaning he must have died in the same office occupied by our protagonist. Night 4 is the last we hear of Phone Guy. So with the phone calls out of the way, what information are we given from the in-game Easter eggs? Well, we have the newspaper clippings. These give us a lot of information. First, that 5 children went missing at a pizzeria. Coincidentally, there are 5 animatronics in FNaF 1, including Golden Freddy. We learn of a tragic and horrific event in which a man used a costume of one of the animatronics to lure children into a back room. It's implied that the children were killed, but the newspaper only states that the children weren't found. However, the fate of the children is implied in another clipping, stating that customers report blood and mucus coming from the animatronics. This most likely means that the kidnapped children were killed and stuffed inside the animatronics. The final newspaper clipping shows us that Freddy's is planned to close soon because a past tragedy is driving the public away from it. That's pretty much all the information we get as to what happened at Freddy's, so let's piece the story together. At some point during a day at Freddy's, someone dressed in a mascot costume and lured at least 2 children into a back room, where he killed them and put them into animatronic suits, probably after business hours. After 5 children had gone missing, someone was arrested and convicted for the kidnapping of these victims. However, the bodies were never found. With this story making headlines, Freddy's publicity is tarnished, and they eventually go out of business. That's where we come in. We play as a security guard. We're probably here so as to prevent any potential killers from finding their way in. But of course, it isn't the killer we are worried about, it's the animatronics. The presence of a security guard is a move of desperation from the Freddy's company, showing people that they care about their security and safety, when of course it's far too late for that, and the brand has already been tarnished. The Bite of 87, though mentioned by the phone guy, doesn't seem like a huge setback for Freddy's on its own. The victim of this bite did not die, so it's entirely possible it didn't shift the public's perception all that much. Mike Schmidt finishes his week with an overnight shift, then sneaks in to change how the animatronics act for one last night, and in doing this, he gets fired. With all that being said, that is the story of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. FNaF 2 gives us much more to work with in understanding the story, but also introduces new things that add to our gray area of understanding. Firstly, it's important to understand that this game is undoubtedly a prequel to the first. Once again, the 2 primary means of consuming the story are through the phone calls and in-game Easter eggs. The storytelling in FNaF 2 is interesting in how it tells a story as the week progresses, unlike FNaF 1. One of the first pieces of information we get is that this isn't the first Freddy's location. It's implied that the previous location shut down because of bad publicity, but we don't know what event this is referencing. Phone Guy gives us an exposition as to why the animatronics try to get into our office, but it's possible that he's only regurgitating what management wants him to think. On night 2, Phone Guy tells us that the withered animatronics are from the previous location, which led many people to believe that this game is a sequel. However, these are not the same animatronics, or at least not yet. This could be a design mistake from Scott, but I don't think it is. There are details of the withered animatronics that aren't present in the FNaF 1 renditions. Compare the Freddy's. Original has kneecaps, different foot and head shape, and no buttons. Bonnie has buttons now, wider teeth, and the most damning evidence, a different endoskeleton. Chica's beak is significantly wider, her ankles and feet are different. Foxy is the most obviously different of the bunch. Indeed, these are different animatronics from FNaF 1, but it's possible that they would be turned into the FNaF 1 animatronics, and of course, this is heavily implied at the end of the game. Anyways, back to the phone call. Phone Guy tells us to ignore the rumors spreading about Freddy's. It's clear that he has a lot of faith in the establishment and company at this point, but what rumors are spreading? Have children started going missing? It's unclear as to whether or not the 5 children dying happened in this building. Maybe it already has happened. Maybe it's progressively occurring as the week concludes. What we do know is that someone has begun tampering with the animatronics, causing them to become more and more aggressive. Night 5 is nearing the climax of the FNAF 2 story. The building is quote-unquote on lockdown, and from what the phone guy says, this is most likely because of a dangerous employee. Phone guy says a position during the day shift just became available, but this could be as a result of employees quitting or someone being fired. We also learn of a previous restaurant, the first restaurant, Fredbear's Family Diner. On night 6, we learn that the building is closed and we are risking our life just by showing up to work. This is where we start to learn of the events described in the FNAF 1 newspaper clippings. Someone used a yellow mascot suit to lure children to the back room. The suit in question was probably Golden Freddy, seeing as it has no endoskeleton in it. However, we never see where the suit was stored in-game. We know now that the animatronics were tampered with to the point where they are dangerous to guests. Still, there's one last event to be had tomorrow, and the protagonists will be there, watching over the animatronics. Upon completing Night 6, it is revealed that the year is 1987, the same year that the bite took place. It's most probable that the final event before Freddy's closure was that of the bite of '87. But wait, the paychecks for Night 5 and 6 are issued to Jeremy Fitzgerald in November, which is strange when you consider that this is a summer job, or so the phone guy says on Night 1. You might think, well, we must be working in a country where summer takes place in November, except we're being paid in USD, so no. This, once again, could be an error on Scott's part, but because I'm so goddamn generous, I'll work it into the story as Freddy's Pizza's assets being frozen during the investigation, so paying employees would take several months longer. But even then, the Night 5 and Night 6 checks are dated one day after the other, so maybe they were written out over the course of 2 days? With the phone calls out of the way, we can look into the Easter eggs, which provide us with both unique yet cryptic perspectives of the story. Firstly, we are introduced to the killer of the children, the Purple Man. We know he's the killer as he is present in the Foxy minigame only when the children have died. He kills a child outside Freddy's, and is present in the FNAF 2 building with all 5 dead children present, and blood coating the floor. The purple guy also deactivates Freddy, hinting that he is the one tampering with the animatronics. Given all this information, let's paint the picture that is the FNAF 2 story. This is most likely the second rendition of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The restaurant opens and everything is going relatively fine. Sure, the night guards are complaining about their working conditions, but we can just switch them over to the day shifts. As people keep booking events, rumors start to spread about the safety of the establishment. However, there's no evidence of any safety risk at Freddy's yet. So the week continues, and an employee is discovered tampering with the animatronics, resulting in them becoming more aggressive towards adults. The employee found doing this was fired, but he was able to find a way back in, and the other employees knew he would try. The next day, he came back and used a spare suit to lure children into a back room, where he then proceeded to take their lives, greatly aggravating the animatronics. It's important to note that this murder spree was separate from the ones that took place during FNAF 1, because the killer would have no suits to put the children in. You wouldn't be able to use the withered animatronics as they would barely hide the bodies at all considering how many holes each one has, and you couldn't use the toy animatronics because there are only 3 suits that would fit a child. The mangle has no body, only a skeleton, and the puppet is far too thin to store a body in. Indeed, the dead children were left there in the back room until the restaurant closed for the day, and the killer hid in the restaurant until it was empty. He came out, tampered with the robots one last time, just to ensure one of them would attack a customer, then left. The disappearance of the children forced Freddy's to go into lockdown, making sure that only employees could get in and out, but were still not allowed to. Freddy's would remain open for one more day, a kid's birthday party. Then they would have to temporarily close pending the investigation of the missing kids. It was on this day that one of the animatronics, probably a toy animatronic, bit a customer, plunging Freddy's into closure. The toy animatronics were scrapped, but the withered animatronics were kept to one day be refurbished. They would eventually become the animatronics we see in FNAF 1. Then FNAF 1 happens. We know what the bite of '87 is, and we also know that the purple guy is responsible for the murder of several children, including those put into the refurbished suits. What was speculated in FNAF 1, but is more or less confirmed in FNAF 2, is that the dead children are possessing the animatronics of FNAF 1. The puppet had given them life. We don't know why or how, but the Give Life minigame tells us that much. And that's the story of FNAF. Or at least, the story as it was at the time of FNAF 2. Let's move on to FNAF 3. FNAF 3 confirms several things we had to guess at, like how the FNAF 1 location closed. No longer are we in a pizzeria, rather a Freddy's scare attraction. The building is full of props from the many restaurants of the past. Fazbear Fright has very poor ventilation, and as a result the building poses a fire hazard. The protagonist is a security guard meant to keep the building running overnight, more or less. The employees got in contact with one of the pizzeria builders of the FNAF 1 location. and they learn that there is a sealed off safe room that could have more relics from Freddy's. It's night 2, and after opening the safe room, the employees find two very important things. Firstly, phone guide training tapes, which explore more of the practices held at Freddy's, but even worse than that, they find a real working animatronic, or so they thought they did, and they let it roam free in the building. Of course, we know this to be Springtrap, the antagonist of FNaF 3, and the more elusive antagonist of FNaF 1 and 2. The phone guide tapes reveal several things to us. First, that the phone guy wasn't just a security guard and also did training tapes for newer employees. Duh. Phone guy says that they currently have 2 suits made specifically for human wear, and we learn from this game that those 2 suits are Golden Freddy and Springtrap, but more on that later. We also learn that the suits are made to follow audio cues, which help the protagonist lure Springtrap away from himself. Night 3 reveals to us that the Springlock suits are incredibly delicate and pretty dangerous. We also learn that every Freddy's establishment comes with a safe room, which we can now determine is the room that the purple guy lured the children into. Animatronics are physically unable to enter this room, so it makes sense to hide in there, especially for malicious purposes. During Night 4, we hear of a gruesome incident at the sister location, in which a Springlock suit malfunctioned, either killing or injuring someone. The company elected to no longer use Springlock suits, instead ordering employees to use costumes so as to not die on the job. We then learn more about the safe room and how the Springtrap suit was stored in it. And on Night 6, we learn about the sealing of any and all safe rooms across all the Fazbear establishments. It's most likely that the sealing of the safe rooms is in response to the events of FNaF 1 or 2 as a precautionary measure to prevent similar things from happening. Everything I just stated is from the phone calls, and while this game has Easter egg minigames that elaborate on the story, they are less relevant to understanding the story until the later nights. Between each night is a very straightforward minigame, where you play as one of the 4 main animatronics in the abandoned FNaF 1 location and try to enter the safe room, but just as the phone guy said, animatronics are unable to. The purple guy runs out and dismantles each of the animatronics, but we are unsure of his motivation. On Night 5, we play as a dead child, and as we make our way to the safe room, the purple man no longer has any power over us. In fear, he runs into the Springlock suit, thinking it would be safe, but he was wrong. The Springlocks failed, locking the purple guy in his own personal prison, doomed to suffer the same fate that he imposed on the children he murdered. The victims had exacted their revenge. We also have 2 secret minigames, which are the only important ones. First, we have Stage 01, implying that this is the first restaurant of Freddy's. We now know that the Golden Freddy and Golden Bonnie, or Springtrap, are the first animatronics. Next, the final minigame, the one which grants us the good ending, is Happiest Day. In this minigame, the puppet brings all the dead children together to lay their souls to rest. They were possessed and tortured, and reliving hell through the body of animatronic characters. But finally, they were at peace. With the mascot suits now truly empty, and our protagonist now painfully aware of who Springtrap really is, that being a human trying to kill him, he burns the building down in an attempt to end the monster that is Springtrap once and for all. It isn't even hard. The building is a huge fire hazard anyway, but unfortunately for the victims of the Purple Man, he survived. With that, the story of Five Nights at Freddy's is over. The souls of the children were laid to rest. The entity that was Fazbear Inc. has been vanquished, and Springtrap was limited to his suit. And then FNaF 4 came out. FNaF 4 changes the narrative the most out of all the games we've seen thus far. No longer are we in an establishment or in a child's bedroom. We have no phone calls this time, only minigames which tell most of the story. This game establishes everyone's least favorite and most hated trope in storytelling, the dream theory. The idea that everything previously established is all a dream, a false reality, when in fact, I think everyone has FNaF 4 all wrong. I don't think the protagonist exists in the objective reality, rather he lives in the dream. Let me explain. It's no secret that the nightmare animatronics are hyperbolized renditions of the original animatronics. I think that the child's bedroom, along with the demons he faces, are all in the head of Mike Schmidt after he quits his job at Freddy's. He then dreams of a world where he is a child, constantly being attacked. Mike is experiencing PTSD from his job. It doesn't make half as much sense that a child would have a dream about his own bedroom, a bedroom, mind you, that has 2 entrances to 2 different hallways? The building of this house is less plausible than the building of the FNaF 1 office. This also explains why the beeping alarm clock ends the nightmare. What about the minigames, you ask? And I say, this is the original event that forces Fredbear's to close. The crying child in the minigame doesn't have to be Mike, nor the protagonist of FNaF 4. He could be a random child for all we know, that just happens to be caught up in this horrible circumstance because of his cruel brother, and that we bear witness to through the minigames. Do you understand why I made the video this way? Scott didn't really have a plan for this story, and for that reason, it changes drastically over the course of 3 games. FNaF 4 specifically is so open to interpretation that it's nearly impossible to get any concrete information out of it. And it's like, yeah, maybe FNaF 4 is a dream, but then Sister Location releases, and oh, it's not a dream, but it still kind of is. This is why people hate the dream theory. See, I love these games, they hold a very special place in my heart, but not for the storytelling aspect, which I need to talk about. Guys, if you're writing a story, you can't do things like have two very similar events take place. There shouldn't be a bite of 83 and a bite of 87. There shouldn't be two identical animatronics that play drastically different roles, like Golden Freddy and Fredbear. And you don't write a story with 5 characters and have 2 of them named Mike. Once again, I love this game, but I really have no faith at this point that any piece of FNaF media will present some grand tie-in with the locked box, the It's Me messages, the bite of 87, the shadow animatronics. You get the idea. Anyways, that's my little side rant, and I'm going to continue, but take everything I just said about FNaF 4 with a pound of salt, because most of it is my own theory. In reality, if I just say everything we know for certain about FNaF 4, it's that the bedroom exists, as evidenced by Sister Location, which goes against the point of the video anyway. So really, we know nothing about FNaF 4. Sister Location, once again, goes in a very new direction from the gameplay of the previous games, with each night being different. This is the game I believe Scott actually started thinking about what the story of FNaF is, and this is the 5th game in the franchise, excluding FNaF World. I digress. In this game, we play as Eggs Benedict. No, in this game, we don't know our protagonist. Is it finally the purple guy? William Afton is the purple guy, and we turn purple at the end of the game, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense considering he built everything in the Sister Location, or so the introductory cutscene suggests. Some people suggest we are playing as Mike, because Hand Unit has Mike's sticker on it. Which Mike? Mike Schmidt? Michael Afton? This is what I'm talking about, guys. Anyways, you're a security guard / maintenance worker. You have nightly tasks, which are of course bullshit because your real task is surviving the robots, but we get lore along the way. William Afton created the Sister Location characters to entice children to eventually capture them. The animatronics are built with internal storage capsules to store the kidnapped children, but William Afton is also a family man, and he instructs his daughter to stay away from Circus Baby. Of course, Afton, in his infinite wisdom, flies too close to the sun, and his creation kidnaps his own daughter. In the private room, Ennard impersonates Elizabeth and says, "Didn't you come here to be with me again?" This strongly suggests that the protagonist is either William Afton or another member of his family, be that his son or his wife. In this room is also a camera feed of the FNaF 4 bedroom, which leads us to believe that at least some of FNaF 4 was real. The only problem with this is that we know this is the fake ending. There's no guarantee that anything in this room is canon. Credit where it's due, this game has less to do with the original FNaF location, which is good because trying to tie that to the Sister Location would make me pull my hair out. Ennard is the insidious antagonist of Sister Location, with his plan being to scoop the organs out of a human and wear his skin like a suit so he can escape the living hell that is the Sister Location. He succeeds, but his human facade doesn't last forever, and eventually the human skin he was using rots to a nasty purple color. Ennard leaves the husk of a human, but that husk survived. This is the creation of the Purple Man, who will now begin his reign of terror, kidnapping and murdering children. Indeed, Sister Location has to precede FNaF 2, which leads us to an obvious problem. These animatronics are far too advanced to be the first ones made. You really want me to believe that the helium and ice cream dispensing sentient storage unit animatronics came before this? It's a tough sell, but really it's the only thing that makes sense. So, just to recap, in Sister Location, William Afton, who created all the animatronics, disguises himself and tries to find his daughter stored in Circus Baby. We know he's disguising himself because Ennard hints at it during the Night 4 monologue without outright saying it, which would cause William to become suspicious and avoid returning.
Do you ever play make-believe? Pretend to be one way when you are really the other? It's very important.
On Night 5, Ennard deceives William, making it seem like Baby wants to release Elizabeth from her storage, but this is a lie meant to lure William Afton to the scooping room, where Ennard can take his body. Ennard escapes from the Sister Location, presenting as William Afton, until William no longer passes as a normal human, and Ennard flees into the sewer. However, by some miracle of God, William survives, and proceeds to pursue everything we know about him from FNaF 1 through 4. Finally, we arrive at the most satisfying conclusion to the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's 6. Beginning this game, the character that is our protagonist is unknown, but we already have a goal. We want them all in one place. Before we proceed with the conclusion of the story, let's talk about the minigames that provide some good information. First, we have Fruity Maze, which isn't super lore-rich, it really just displays one of William's many victims. Then we have Midnight Motorist. We learn that William Afton loves drunk driving. Let's go! No, only kidding once again. We have to make a guess as to whether or not we play as William Afton. You would assume we aren't, because we play as an orange figure, not purple. But I like to think we do, and here's why. The building we aren't allowed in is called Juniors, and I think this is the FNaF 2 location. In FNaF 2, Phone Guy says they remade the models to be totally kid-friendly, which leads me to believe the location is intended for younger kids, thus juniors. But why would the green person say we know we aren't allowed in? We are William Afton, a returning, fired employee. We aren't allowed in because the building is on lockdown and William was already fired from the job. William goes home to his remaining family and he wants to exert control over his son. After all, even the faintest hit of carelessness cost him his daughter. His wife knows he's very controlling, and so does his son, and his son runs off to avoid his father. The final minigame with meaning is Security Puppet, which is a second portrayal of an event we have already witnessed. On the day of this minigame, a little girl was locked out of Freddy's when a car drove up behind her and William Afton took her behind the building to kill her. Then the security puppet, designed to protect the children, went to the dying child, but in the rain the animatronic short-circuited and died at the same time as the little girl, becoming the giver of life, the puppet. Over the week of FNaF 6, we are tasked with gathering the animatronics into the safe room, repurposed into a labyrinth, little to their knowledge. All the animatronics find their way to Freddy's as they are drawn to it knowing what it really means, pretending to lack sentience in order to pass as safe attractions. The protagonist, unsure of his employer and goal, complies, igniting a family reunion of sorts, with William Afton, Ennard, and Baby not having seen each other in years. Once everyone is gathered in one place in the last day, Baby remarks on our stupidity, how we had fallen into her trap, allowing 4 monsters to unite as one. This is when our employer reveals himself, sealing the safe room, the one who gathered us all here, the father of the girl killed with the puppet at her side.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
With the puppet hidden inside the lefty suit, all the animatronics were burned so as to lay the victims of William Afton to rest. However, William's fate was bound to his karma, and as such he went to hell, to endlessly suffer for the amusement of his victims. William Afton and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza are no more. And with that, concludes the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. I know a lot of what I just said is theory, but I believe my intuition helps tie the story together a lot. Of course, there are still unanswered questions like what's in the box, and I don't care. What about X bonus media? And once again, I don't care. It only takes away from the story at this point. I already made a video about the movie, but it doesn't change my understanding of the storytelling of the games on their own. If you want endless FNaF lore, go watch MatPat. He'll make FNaF videos till he's 80 years old. Let me give context that any artist watching this will understand. When you make art, there's a point where your art is as good as it's gonna get, and yet the artist continues to add unnecessary details until the perfection of his art is degraded. There's no coming back from that. You really need to avoid falling into that trap. Thank you so much for watching. As I'm writing this, I'm realizing this is probably the longest video I've ever made, so I really appreciate you sticking through until the end. If I missed any crucial details, please let me know. I might have to reconsider everything I thought I knew. I love you like a fat kid loves cake, and thank you for visiting Walter's World.
Walter, remember when the world was young and all the girls knew Walter's name? Walter, isn't it a shame the way